Great. Well, thank you everyone for coming out today. We're going to do a little discussion with about invasive species. A few bits of information before we get started. Indiana has about 120 invasive and terrestrial aquatic species, and it costs the cities and individuals and organizations about $5.8 million per year in order to control those. And just to give like, why are we doing this? Just one piece of information before we jump in. Indiana ranks third in hardwood production in the state, and that generates about $31.2 billion. And a lot of these invasive species have a significant impact on the health and quality of our hardwood forests. With that said, I'm going to introduce Amber Slaughterback first. She works for SICM, which is the Southern Indiana Cooperative Invasive Management Group. They started out actually Southern, and then they grew to be all of Indiana. They've established regional specialists like Amber who are working with counties to develop organizations like TICT, which is the Tippecanoe Invasive Cooperative Taskforce, in order to address the issues of invasive species. We also have Bryce Passan with us, who's the Community Forestry and Green Space Manager for the City of West Lafayette. He's going to be talking about the local efforts on Calorie Repair. And I will then be following up after the two of them, talking about Niche's efforts in Tippecanoe County. And TICT had a strategic plan. It was kicking off in 2020, kind of got delayed with all the other stuff in 2020. As we come out of the pandemic, at least the worst of it, we're ready to start implementing the objectives and goals for prevention, early detection, and management. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Amber, and hear about the efforts being done on in Vigo County. So thanks for joining us.
Great, thanks, Gus, and thanks for having me. And that was a spectacular introduction, Gus, I must say. So I'm Amber Slaughterback, as Gus said, and I represent both Tippecanoe County and Vigo County. So that the county I'm going to talk about tonight is Vigo, and an effort they've been doing over the last year and going to do it again this fall, and possibly something that Tippecanoe County or other counties that are tuning in could adopt. So I was actually thinking about this and realized today that this year I will have been in both Vigo County and Tippecanoe County the same amount of years, which is 19 years each, which is crazy, right? I grew up in Lafayette, so both counties are dear to me. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. If it'll let me.
You are clear to share.
All right, awesome. Here we go. All right, hopefully everybody can see that okay. So Vigo Invasives Management, what we and a lot of my counties have done is kind of asked ourselves, what are we able to do with what we have? And so we'll go through a program that we've been implementing and doing a pretty good job of doing it. And hopefully you guys will see that it's something that you can do. So Vigo Invasives Management, this is their mission statement, so to speak: education, preservation, and protection. And they're a group of volunteers who provide education about invasive species in Vigo County. So that's one of the main goals, is to raise awareness. And we thought, okay, so what are the issues? And after several landowner surveys, I realized that the invasive vines, English ivy and winter creeper in particular, both were really an issue in Vigo County for a lot of small parcels in town, and Terre Haute in particular. So we asked ourselves, what can we do? We're a small group of volunteers with limited resources, as a lot of SISMAs are, and no real funding or robust partnerships within the county to date, I should add. And multiple neighborhoods, a lot of the historic neighborhoods had these really awful infestations of not only ivy and winter creeper on the ground, but a lot of infestations growing up the trees. And as most of us know, that means that those are producing berries. So that was a big red flag for us as a group. And we thought, well, can we do anything about that? And of course, lack of awareness within Vigo County and a lot of counties is a goal of all of us. So the model we started kicking around the idea in actually probably late 2019, and then early 2020, we were ready to get it going. And then as all of us witnessed the pandemic, we kind of put the brakes on a little bit to figure out what was the best way to proceed. And we decided we would kick it off in October of 2020, and that we could still manage. By that point, we felt we could still manage to, wear masks and distance and work around these spaces that we were going to tackle in a safe manner. So we gathered resources, tried to figure out, what funding we had as a small group and what tools we needed to actually do the work when we got on site. We determined who was actually able to execute the program itself and who would be able to help us spread the word. And then, of course, we need to do our own research so that we could give the right information to those landowners once we arrived on site. So one of the products we developed, or resources rather, was this brochure. So this is one side of the brochure. And this is something that we decided we wanted to hand out to the landowners when we arrived. This is the inside of the brochure. And I can send you this file if you'd like to check it out. And then, of course, we had to advertise. So this was our flyer, and we asked everyone, does your tree look like this? It shouldn't. We can help. And so we asked folks to send us a photo of the species that they were dealing with, just to make sure we weren't looking at grapevine or anything that's native like Virginia creeper. We wanted to, make sure that they were sending us the right information. And so we would verify that, and then we would sign them up. We decided that we really wanted to tackle 10 landowners for the first year just to see how it went. And we found out that was easy to fill. So we had them sign up by either email or texting. That's my phone number on there. And they would text us images and also email us images and sign them up. And those are the news coverage links on that slide. So another thing we developed was this, and I'd be happy to send it to you. We all kind of worked together on this and ran it across a couple desks rather to see what everybody thought about it. And this is so when we leave after we've worked on that vine on the tree, they can, continue that work with all the vines that are on the ground. That give them some ownership. And we only chose one tree. I don't think I've said that yet. We only did one tree. So if they had a whole bunch of trees, we chose the worst one. So this is what we saw on site. As you guys can imagine, I actually started cutting into this and realized, oh, we need a before picture. Oopsie. So this is what we saw. Pretty nasty. Early on, we realized, wow, this is something we can make a huge impact with. And also it's going to take some time. So we greet landowners, sign waivers. You want a hold harmless waiver of some sort for them to sign. You do want to let them know, hey, we might accidentally cut into your tree, just so you know. And all the landowners were like, oh yeah, that's no problem. Discuss disposal, because you will have some leftover parts of the vine, and you need to make sure the landowner knows that they need to dispose of it correctly. And then begin. So here are just some images for you guys of the trees that we came across in Vigo County. And I believe this was the second tree that we went to. The first tree is actually in the news. So if you wanted to see the first tree that we went to, it's in that news link. But here's the first tree, essentially on site. And we made a crop top on this one that we started coining the term crop top, because you have to cut all the way around, and it looks like the tree's wearing a crop top. And do you guys see all the Calorie Repair in the background? Yeah. So this is what it looked like, and I wonder if it'll play. Let's see. Oh yeah. So when you cut, I don't know if you guys have ever done this, you have to make sure you go all the way around the tree. And try not to trip. So you get the idea. And also you don't want to pull the vines off. Any of those thick vines, you'll pull the bark off. there anybody dizzy yet? See if we can go forward. Yes, friends. Great. Swell. Okay, next tree. So you guys can see. So that was before us working on it. After, you can see some of the huge vines that were on that one. Another, and we found so many great big, just magnificent trees, especially oaks in these old neighborhoods that were really close to dying if we didn't help them out. Another great big tree. See, we were socially distanced on each side of these huge trees, so it worked out just great. Another tree for you. Barbara with her hammer. Here's another crop top tree. And so we're gonna do it again. It was a really good program. We had, pardon me, we had on top of the trees we were able to actually treat, we had a lot of follow-up questions, and even still we have people hearing about our vine program and wondering how they can get signed up and get involved in it. And it's entirely free, so that's a big part of it. Is, you know, we're doing it at no charge to any landowner within the county, so they have to live within the county. So that's our September 2021 is the sign up for this year. And of course, don't forget to sign up for a SISMA conference in August, and you'll learn a whole bunch of awesome things that are going on across the state, not just in Vigo County, but all over the place. And here's the Vigo Invasives Management Gmail account, and you can also find them on Facebook. So go check them out, like their page, and implement this program. I also have a list of tools that I can send you of what we used. So thank you.
Thanks, Amber.
Thank you.
How many volunteers do you have assisting with the efforts?
5 total. Yeah.
Cool. Excellent, excellent. We are at 6:45. So Bryce, you are up next. And again, and if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat box, and we will get to those in the end. Hopefully everyone is well aware of Calorie Repair and it's the evil that it brings on the world. And Bryce is doing some great work within the city to address that. So stage is all yours, Bryce.
All right. My name is Bryce Passan with the City of West Lafayette. I'm the Community Forestry and Green Space Manager for the city. I'm also on the steering committee for TICT here in Tippecanoe. And yeah, so West Lafayette, we've actually partnered with the City of Lafayette as well as TICT and Water and Soils Conservation District to do what we call a bounty on our Calorie Repair within the county itself. So what I'll be talking about today, and I don't have any slides, I thought I'd just have it just casual conversation. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and I'll grab them as they come along. But basically the background of it was that we have finally got caught up in terms of our street tree inventory on dealing with the emerald ash borer in our ash trees. So back in 2016, we had roughly 1,000 street trees that were ash in our community, in our urban forest. And by 2019, we were down to 100. So that was a massive amount of trees that we had to remove. And those remaining 100 are being treated by homeowners. So we are constantly monitoring those. But the reason why I bring that up is that now that we have all this space for trees, and we do have a planting program with the partners with West Lafayette Tree Friends, we provide free tree replacements. A lot of homeowners decided, you know, we want to plant our own trees out there as well. So we had actually an increase of Calorie Repair that were being planted just because it was out at any home improvement store and their garden center. There's a Calorie Repair ready to be picked up and place there. So the idea came up with, as we were talking with these homeowners, I would always say, hey, if I remove this tree that you planted, I can provide a free replacement tree for you through our already program called Operation Relief, which is a tree replacement program. So with that said, we are caught up with ash trees. We're replacing ash trees by requests, but that was also time for us to go back and look at what is existing, which we had not just new calorie repair that's being planted, but we have roughly about 400 calorie repair that are mature, that's in our public right of way, or in parklands that are more prominent there. So from there, we announced in the fall of 2019, we said, hey, we're doing this program. If you have a calorie repair, contact the city. If it's in the public right of way, we'll do an assessment. We'll get that removed and we can get you on a replacement list. And then COVID hit, which then froze all of those funds that were set aside specifically for that program, because that needed to be reverted back to making sure that emergency personnel as well as other funds are taken care of. So 2020 was a wash. We did not get very far. We did remove a roughly 10 calorie repair part of that program, but we had to kind of freeze at that point beyond that. So we are slowly bringing that back. We do have roughly 20 that are on our list to remove. What we're doing is we're getting caught up on some of our hazardous trees that we do need to remove first, that were kind of delayed through 2020 due to COVID, but they're right next on that list where we're going to be removing those. So we have trees already lined up for this fall, and what we do is we offer any homeowners that have a tree that's in their public right of way that's a calorie repair, you can select that tree that's off of our list. And we'll line that up for the fall. So we'll have the tree removed at no cost to the homeowner. We'll ground out the stumps as well. And then in the fall, we'll come back and we'll do that tree planting. The majority of the trees that are on our list in general are native. We do have a few species that are non-native, but they're tough urban trees. So a good example would be our frontier elm, which we use when we know it's going to be a pretty rough site, but we need some tree canopy in there. But the majority of our fall list, except for one species, are all native, such as yellowwood, which is one of our hardier street trees that we use. We also have bald cypress and Kentucky coffee tree that would be in there as well. So what we're doing is we're diversifying our urban forest is the main point of all of this. You know, we're removing ash tree, which was almost 40% of our urban forest in general. Of species wise, and then we're once we got that down and removed, we have a few other species that we're bringing down. So with this replacement program of getting that invasive species out, diversifying by putting multiple species back in their place, we're creating a more sustainable program. I mentioned a little bit earlier that we are partnering with both the City of Lafayette and Soils and Water. So what we realized was, you know, it's not just the trees in public right of way that we can do this replacement, but the other half of the urban forest is private property. So we developed this program where Water and Soils donated funds to purchase trees ahead of time. So we just reserved those for the fall. And so if you do have a tree that's on public or on private property to where city funds can't be available, you can apply for that application. So in the chat in a little bit, I'll put that link. We partnered with Wabash River Enhancement Corporation to where they're housing the application. But you can go ahead if you have a calorie repair or know somebody that has a calorie repair, you can send that link to them. And we'll have some representative at part of that partnership, depending on where you're at in the county. We'll go out there, we'll verify that's a calorie repair. And if the property owner removes it, we'll get you that free tree. And as well as instructions and care on how to care for that native tree that we're going to be providing. So it's a great partnership. COVID really put a slow rollout to this program, but now that we're getting caught up and we're allocating funds to get this project done, we're hoping that in 2021 and 2022, we get ahead and removing those calorie repair from our public properties and get a dent in that private property where so many people have planted those trees. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Thank you, Bryce, for your leadership on that. The Lafayette community is outside of town is really suffering from calorie repair damage. It's shocking when it's all in bloom and can be seen.
Yeah, it's popping up everywhere, especially in areas that are NDOT owned. Some areas they've stopped mowing, and it's just amazing what pops up in 1 year, just 1 year of not mowing in those right of ways. So yeah, there's definitely a lot more work that we can do, especially with partners that are out there. But definitely, if you see one, or if you know a neighbor that could use a replacement tree, definitely once I share that link in the chat, please spread the word, and I'll put my contact information there as well for anyone to pass that along.
Bryce, there's a question about the best time to control calorie repair.
Yeah, really, anytime that you can do that removal is best. In my opinion, getting those trees removed before the flowering and the pollen spreading, that's really what you want to do, is get that seed bank out there, get that population dropped, so then we can get ahead long term. Depending on the size of the trees, there's different methods that you can do. If it's a smaller tree, you can do a scratch bark application. If it's a larger tree, you definitely need to look at doing that removal. Always contact a certified arborist to do any of those major removals. I know most people that you might have that background, but if you're a homeowner that doesn't have that background, it is much safer to have a professional do that. There's a website called treesaregood.org, and you can easily just type in your zip code and you can locate a certified arborist in your area. So that's a great resource you can look at. But definitely try to get those trees removed before they flower. That's the best way to make sure that we don't have fruits being developed, not just with that tree that you're working on removing, but in the nearby areas with the pollen that spreads.
And additionally, Bryce, there was a discussion about, or any discussion about efforts to control the multiple acres between 26 and the airport road east of 231. And I guess one question that you had mentioned the cities, where does Purdue stand in the calorie repair effort?
Yeah, so that is actually not owned by Purdue either. Part of it is NDOT owned. Part of it is drainage, that's part of Purdue. And the other part of that lot is actually owned by a private entity. So that's a huge discussion when we're talking about who owns what. And from a municipality standpoint, if it's public or private property, I should say, then it's illegal for us to spend any dollars on maintaining that. So it's all about making sure we have those conversations and working with those partners and figuring out a way to get it done. So that particular area, there's multiple property owners involved to where it's kind of a tough conversation to have. I will say the majority of that is owned by privately by a developer that was recently moved from Purdue Research Foundation to a private entity to be developed. So, what we can do is they're very much aware. Part of the city conversation with that development was we brought that up as a way of what can we do in the meantime for that area. So we continue to have those conversations when we can, and hopefully we can get something happening there.
I know a site with Oriental Bittersweet that development seems like the right solution too. Jason, I'm not understanding your question for Amber about the gaping. Could you unmute yourself, and you mind just asking that?
Can you guys hear me? Basically, I guess not gaping, gapping. Like if you just cut a vine straight across with a chainsaw, or not a chainsaw, but something to cut it, do you need a gap between, the top vine that you cut off and the bottom vine? If it's only basically a 1/4 inch gap between those two, is there some way it can reconnect, or, reconnect if you don't treat it? Or do you actually want to have a more significant gap cutting, 2 sections instead of just cut the vine in half?
Yeah, so my main goal is to be able to get my little 2-ounce dauber in there. So I like to cut a good space, but just to ensure that, yes, it won't grow right back up the tree. Of course, we treat the cut immediately, but if it were to try to grow up the tree, we try to cut a good space in between there. It just helps to maneuver your dauber in or your spray bottle as well.
Cool. That makes sense, Jason.
Yeah, that works. Thanks.
Cool. And thanks, Bryce, for the link for those of you on private land in the cities. There's a link there to apply for, get yourself a tree after you remove a tree.
Yeah, if you're within West Lafayette city limits and you have a Calorie Repair within the public right of way, give me a call. Happy to add you on my list and make that a priority to get that tree replaced.
Great, thanks. All right. I was going to give a quick overview of some of the work that Niches is working on in Tippecanoe County. Just going through the properties that we have, as well as and what we're working on those respective properties to give, I guess, a breadth of the number of species that is being dealt with in any given time, and just yeah, there's a few really nasty ones that cause a lot and take a lot of our time and effort, but there's quite a few that are out there. So I just walk through them and kind of talk about that. Our headquarters is at Clegg, and Clegg has a rich history of having many things planted there. So it's some of them are mild things such as, Siberian scilla and stuff moving through the woods and winter aconite. But the ones that are truly, because it's also an urban preserve, are the burning bush, the honeysuckle, garlic mustard, sweet clover on the Gravel Hill Prairie. We have lots of winter creeper. So the Vigo vine crew is welcome to come on up to the greater Clegg community anytime, as well as Dames Rocket. And again, those are all fairly regular things in beat up areas, as well as sometimes in nice natural areas as well. Mulvey Pond up on US 52 or 231 north of 52. Breed canary grass is our big issue there. And with a lot of the efforts that we have along the Wabash River, reed canary grass is a very common theme and quite impactful on a lot of the natural areas that the organization protects. So moving down the Wabash at our Parker's Indian Creek Basin, Calorie Repair has moved in some of the uplands there, multiflora rose, and then the two grasslands, Phragmites or common reed and reed canary, form a lot of the time and effort at that location. Across the street and to the north, the honeysuckle and garlic mustard and stiltgrass are the big issues at our Frank and Ada Beinecke Memorial Forest. Stiltgrass is one of those that's somewhat in the early stages in the county. Sadly, when we first started dealing with it about 4 years ago, we were hoping that we could nip that in the bud, but it's moving through the landscape a lot faster than we would have hoped. Those of you that are just or haven't become familiar with that species yet, some of the damage it's done in southern Indiana woodlands. I was just horrified in seeing in North Carolina just basically taking over a state park about 1.5 years ago. Anyway, so we're working on it at that property, and I know that Martell at Purdue is working hard at it too. Likely it came in from some of the forestry work that they're doing there, but they're doing a really good job of trying to get a handle on it. Our Parker's Hickory Grove Farm, a lot of honeysuckle has been dealt with. It just was basically the woods you had to crawl through when that was donated to us, and we've just had to put in a lot of efforts and have some great response from a volunteer crew there, regular monthly work days, as well as multiflora rose. Our Potawatomi Trail property, moving toward the west end of the county, is reed canary, white mulberry, honeysuckle and oxeye daisy in the old fields, as well as a little bit of sweet clover. And then our Granville sandbarrens, which has probably got the most interesting and unusual situation of sand kind of deposit along the Wabash River, has just about every open country problem, as well as lots of good stuff there. So mullein, Queen Anne's lace, sweet clover, musk thistle, garlic mustard, Siberian elm, honeysuckle. It's got a little bit of floodplain, so it's got its issues with it. What I said, the elm there as well. And then lastly, our Laura Hare Preserve, Reed Canary is kind of the big effort there. That's with that piece of woodland there. Interestingly, the Wabash has a lot of its issues with flooding, and for getting tree establishment, you'd think it'd be a little bit easier, but it's not as easy as one would think to get trees to grow always on the Wabash. And Reed Canary grass, if it gets that foothold in those early years, really takes over on that. So additional work that Niches is doing in the county at South River Road, partnering with the Wabash River Enhancement Corporation. We've been contracted to take out the invasives in the woody, or the woody invasives there. So that's a lot of honeysuckle, tree of heaven, autumn olive, Calorie Repair, and they're working on the garlic mustard there. And then also in that area at the Ross Reserve, owned by PRF, honeysuckle and autumn olive are the big problematic species for there. The greater efforts made by TICT, we're trying to support as best we can. There's a lot of great things going on there outside of some of the organizations that presented. The RIP Squad's been working for over 10 years in the county. It's to remove invasive plants at the Ross Reserve. At Prophet's Rock. There's also great work being done at the state park. There's a lot of to celebrate in the county. Most of the county is in private lands, and those efforts to educate and empower are continuing to be out there. And we don't pretend to have all the solutions. So it'd be great to get input from people and help as people can do it. So I think that just a few pieces of thoughts for me on invasive species. It's oftentimes it can be a little overwhelming, and it's good to be realistic with one's time and what they can contribute, so that you don't feel too overwhelmed, or you take on more if you actually can do more. But keeping your best areas good. And impacting the most acres. So working from the lightest concentration towards the most dense. I think celebrating your wins and assisting others as you can is the way we're going to win this. We don't do it, 40 acres and pretending that the honeysuckle across the way or the Calorie Repair down the road isn't still impacting us. Was anticipating there'd be some questions, and so that's just overview of kind of what Niches is doing, and I want to open the table. So Nick has told us that it's depressing for Stiltgrass. Sadly, it can be in that regard. But any questions about invasive species control or techniques or timing that anyone has and wants to put out on the table?
Gus, you mentioned a lot of work that Niches is doing. Do you have a crew, or are you helping with volunteers, or how do you get all that done?
We have 2 full-time staff stewards that work over the 13 counties, and then we also have a volunteer and outreach coordinator. Altogether, last year, Niches benefited from 9,600 hours of volunteerism.
Wow.
So trying to make it easy for people. That's not all on invasives. We got a trail crew that's working, but making sure they have the supplies to do the work that they do. Try and make it fun and interesting. And as I said, celebrate wins. Mm-hmm. It can be keeping spirits up is important.
Agreed.
Let's see, Lori's question. That's probably a good question for you, Amber. Invasives on the horizon that we're seeing that's possibly coming this way.
Yes, is the answer. All around us.
Do you know the species?
There are, well, you can basically look in any other state and read their invasive species list and just equate it to our state. There are no walls around us. So especially in the southern states, there's a whole book on southern invasives that you can just watch that wave come this direction. Mimosa tree in particular is one that not a lot of people know is super invasive, and it's taken over the South. Just go down in Kentucky and you'll see it everywhere. It's no different in Indiana. So pretty much any of the invasives on the especially in the Midwest and southern states just directly below us, watch for those. Cutting and treating with glyphosate the main solution for taking care of most of the invasives? Not necessarily, although glyphosate is an herbicide that you can use on a lot of the woody invasives. So you'll hear us talk about that a lot.
Sikkim has a really nice chart that we can send you, Jason, and anyone else, that has outlines out the time of year and the best technique for controlling a whole host of the nastiest of the nasty ones. So get that to you.
Yep. I can send you a whole file of some of the things we've talked about. What are the best ways to dispose of winter creeper that we pull up? If you are able to, I would burn it. Otherwise, you're going to want to bag it, dispose of it.
You don't like composting it or something like of that nature? Just too much of it?
Yeah. Please don't compost invasives. Just creates a new problem.
Well, most people in cities can't burn. I mean,
yeah.
Anyway,
Yep.
So.
Yeah, they can bag it though.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
So thoughts on the best way to get our landscaping places to stop selling invasives?
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
That is a really tough problem to tackle, just because there's, if it's not on the banned list, they can sell it. And typically a lot of in most communities, the places where people often get the landscape plants the most is the big box stores, which has even a broader reach, because most of those plants actually come in from different areas like Oklahoma, and Nebraska actually has a pretty strong nursery program trade out there, and same with Ohio. And also the challenge is that not every state's on the same page with some of these bans on. So we have Ohio, which is probably a little bit ahead of the curve. I don't know if Amber, you agree with that or not, but a lot of that stock actually pours into other states that doesn't have those bans because the nursery needs to sell them. I mean, that's the whole point of it. So for some of the smaller areas, it's great to just have that conversation. If it's a small locally owned business, they either know about it, or if they don't know about it, we don't have to scream at them, just try to give them resources, or ask them. This is the key part too, because as a consumer, the more that you request certain species and constantly request those, they're going to provide those because that's going to be a product that they can sell. So if you can ask for better species, better cultivars of natives, or actual native plants that are just not grown in restoration nurseries, that's going to be a big help too. So it's a tough question, especially for those big box stores, because really the person locally has no control over that.
I just stand there and tell people not to buy it. No, I'm just kidding.
Just hover.
Just hover near the invasives.
Can the city influence neighborhood plantings of pear, etc.? That's a great question. So during the development phase, yes. And what I mean by that is that we have a tree and landscape ordinance, and most municipalities have some form of green space ordinance out there West Lafayette is one of those where our ordinance is tied to development, which means that if you are building anything, if it's commercial to residential, you have to adhere to our ordinance itself. And that is where I review any landscape plans and we weed out those invasives. The challenge is once that permit is closed and is developed, it's back to the property owner. There's not much that we can do unless it's in public right away. So it's all about just making sure that we don't just communicate to the developer, but we can communicate with the homeowner that's just purchasing that, or if we were talking to the property owner that owns a business that's going to have multiple subleases, talk to them about not just designing the landscape for the permit, but why we're designing that way for the maintenance of it, and always refer to you as a resource for them to go any further. So for us, for West Lafayette, it's all about upfront getting the best that we can, and then just keep on educating once the permit's closed.
Yeah, and as Liz Jackson shared, the Indiana Invasive Species Council is looking at Calorie Repair and burning bush, and their list currently. Amber, do you know how many species are on the list now? It's
44.
44. I was going to say 50, so I wasn't way off. So anyway, that's another avenue of on a statewide level of getting the worst species. It's an involved process. The Nursery Trade has a seat at that table, and they obviously have a vested interest. And as Bryce alluded to, it's complicated in terms of how they get their product and everything. But I think the technique and that the Indiana Invasive Species Council has used is puts it in very strong position once things finally get on that list. That it's but it's a little slower than I think of us on the natural areas end would like to see some of the stuff getting on the list, but it's a very collaborative process. I think is a good way to say that.
Yep, we just have to be patient and keep doing good work. And Bryce, I think you answered that brilliantly. I always respond with, we have to stop buying these invasive plants before they'll stop selling them, right? Because as long as we keep buying them, they're going to keep selling them. If we demand natives and that's where our money goes, then they will listen, and they are listening. So it just keep buying those native plants, keep requesting them. It never hurts to talk to the manager at Menards and say, Menards is just where I go. No, they don't pay me. Say like, please switch out that burning bush for a viburnum or something, something native. So just keep doing that.
And I will say the nursery trade is coming a long way versus, the 90s and early 2000s, where they're just dumping as much as they can to get product out there. So we do have a lot with the new generation coming into the nursery trade. There's a lot new products out there, a lot new demands, and there's a lot more cooler plants actually being developed in the nursery trade. So it's not all doom and gloom, but definitely it's all about the consumer side. So the more that you request, the more that they're going to supply, because that's what the customers want.
Mm-hmm.
So whether we buy service berry or not, we should just all go in and say we want service berries.
There you go. Yep.
Correct. You're catching on, Gus.
I'm slow.
Any store in Tippecanoe County selling invasives?
Undoubtedly, yes.
Probably yes. Yeah, I'm just gonna say.
You can certainly find burning bush at a lot of places in town. So.
Yeah.
So lots of managers to talk to.
And if you do happen to see any of the 44 plants that are on the terrestrial plant rule we've talked about, the regulated species now in our state, we do ask that you contact IDNR, Entomology and Plant Pathology, IDEPP, and let your local nursery inspector know that you did see that plant. But you need to take pictures while you're there of the plant and the tag, etc., and let them know everything that you saw while you were there, so that they can decide whether or not it's something they need to pursue.
So we're not supposed to do a citizen's arrest?
You could try.
Do we have a link to the 44 species?
Sure, let me grab it for you. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Knox County has set a county ordinance
I hope that's not just my,
No, Gus, you're breaking up. You've lost your,
Gus, you sound like a robot.
right there, Amber.
and now he's frozen.
Yeah,
Okay.
comical.
Yeah, do I sound better now?
There we
Yes.
go.
All right. Will you take it over, Julie?
Yeah, you want me to take it over? Sure. Well, Gus, if you had a question or something you were trying to say, you might want to type it in the box because I felt like you were addressing something to Amber.
I think in the, and I might be wrong, I think he was talking about Knox County. They do have an ordinance banning some invasive species. So I took a chance, and I think I found a copy of it in the link there. So if that's not the case, Gus, I'm sorry, but
And he's gone. So
and he's gone. So I think that's what he was referring to. But Knox County does have an ordinance banning invasive species, and it's very similar to West Lafayette in terms of it's tied to development process.
perfect.
There's so in addition to the terrestrial plant rule, Knox County took it a level further, and I think they have like 60 plants on their list versus 44.
Yeah, 64, I think.
64. Nice.
All right, he might be back.
I also heard recently
Sorry
that
about
South
that.
Bend banned Calorie Repair. Sorry, Gus, there you are.
Oh, maybe not. So any other questions from anyone? I'm just going to put this out there
I
as
think
a
I'm here.
question.
I think
You
I'm
are
but
here.
I-
You are here.
yeah,
I don't know how much Amber and Bryce you work with landscaping professionals or people who are okay. So I know that when I went through my horticulture classes, we won't say how many years ago, the topic of invasives was not something they really talked about. And I went through horticulture programs during the era when when the pear trees became like the tree that everyone was planting. And so I'm just curious if you've seen classes take a different viewpoint on that, or if people are now being, students are now seeing that as part of the curriculum to think about invasives, or they're actually being taught that they were invasives. Because, the burning bush was also one of the top landscaping plants they kind of talked about when I was a student. So just curious if you've seen that change over the last, hopefully 20 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm a product of the Purdue Horticulture and Landscape Architecture program. So my degree is in public horticulture, which is traditionally Botanical Gardens and Arboretum. But that is very heavily in the curriculum on knowing your plants. And that's really the challenge with a lot of these contractors is within the landscape trade is, typically the turnover is crazy. They can't keep staff there because no one wants to dig a hole anymore or get involved and get their hands dirty. And also there's pay that goes along with that, which is a whole other topic. But because of that, the knowledge isn't there anymore. It's just trying to get someone there to do the job and get it done. And so what the curriculum at Purdue is teaching, and most programs are teaching this as well, is think about the ecology, think about the environment, think about what you're adding and knowing your plants. And if you don't know it, don't go with it. Do your research, do your homework, because you are the steward of the land as a human. And so that's going to be important of that. And the other thing too is it's the right plant in the right place. And unfortunately, some of our natives don't work in an urban environment. So you have to look at what's going to be best in that space, what's going to be still part of the food web, right? Every plant has to do its part. So that's our approach in West Lafayette. That's the approach that the program at Purdue goes and teaches. The Purdue Arboretum is a great resource for you guys as well. They have a great website that talks about all the plant species that they have on campus and call them out if it's invasive species or not, and talk about alternatives they can do with natives. Burning bush, we mentioned that a couple times. You know, our native hazelnut is a great example that can have that same coarse texture, the same bright color, and it's a native shrub that deer love. Same with other animal and critters with their fruits. So that's exactly what they teach: is right plant, right place. Where can we have natives? If it's a really tough site, what's going to do the job with the plant material that goes in there?
Well, that's encouraging. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is also a great question. And this is a whole, again, this could be a whole other topic. So I won't go way in depth with it, but the basics for botanical gardens and arboreta is really founded in conservation. So it's not necessarily bringing in plants for the nursery trade where you distribute out. It's more of conservation of that particular species. And most botanical gardens and arboreta have a particular plant or genus or family that's their focus. So the Morton Arboretum is one of the major global leaders in oak conservation, but they have oaks from all over the world. That's part of their collection there. And it's all about education too. There's some gardens that are more theatrical and it's more of a design aspect, but the basics for the majority of botanical gardens arboreta is based on conservation. So it's really there to preserve those genetics of those unique plants for future use and sake. Another good example would be the Arnold Arboretum in Boston, which is tied to Harvard. Mesa is their one of their major collections, and that species thought was extinct. And they found it in the hills in China, and they brought it back to that collection. So they're preserving those species until they can reintroduce back into the wild. So there's a little bit more than just the ornamental side to botanical gardens. And a lot of the gardens that took that approach are now going towards the conservation route. So it's a good to see that trend going throughout the world.
Sort of like how Clegg changed.
Exactly.
One day we'll be rid of our daffodils in the front.
I think you're very optimistic. I don't think we will.
Well, maybe we just need to make it more of a priority.
Some people come out every year to see them.
To further, Matt, to talk about your point though, if you read the flora of the Chicago region, the Morton Arboretum has led to a number of species that have escaped from the Arboretum that are, you know, in the woods that around the Arboretum there. It's complicated, as Bryce said, in terms of the conservation work they're doing, but obviously some of the stuff they bring in has potential. A lot of things, you know, they're like in Chicago, there's monk parrots, which is a parrot that can handle the cold, and they're barely hanging on. There's like 200 of them, but they've been there for decades and decades. Believe it or not, starlings failed the first time that they were introduced in the U.S. Or was it house sparrows? One of the two failed the first time, but they took the second time. So I mean, there are things that, I mean, there are problems too that some species, garlic mustard didn't exhibit problems for a long time too, and then it exploded on the landscape. So there's a temporal aspect of this that's also very complicated and that we don't really understand totally. Which is why, you know, Niche's perspective is the cautionary principle and just try not to introduce any of the new stuff and just stick with the native materials. So. We can send our starlings back to Europe if that can help. We've preserved their genetics. Are there ever any other questions for the group as we close in on 7:30?
I have a question, which is, can I hire? I have all kinds of honeysuckle and Calorie Repair and autumn olive and a little bit of that burning bush that I want to get rid of, and there's not enough of me to take it out. And I presume that tree service companies know how to do this,
Yeah.
and I
Um,
can hire it done.
if you have a lot of acres or some acres, you can apply for cost share with Equip, or you can hire simply out. Consultant foresters are often sideline when they're not marking trees, doing invasive species work, and are for hire. Soil and water, if you can contact Angie, maintains a list there that she can share with you of contractors that operate in Tippecanoe County. TICT
Okay,
is
Angie.
part of
And
that. So
where is Angie?
she's with the Tippecanoe County Soil and Water office. So
Angie who?
Angie Garcia.
Angie Garcia. Okay, thanks.
Starlings are good with rice, apparently, in the chat room.
Angie, what? Say it again.
Oh, there it is. It's in the chat. They're with their email. So
Yep, I'll let her know. We put her on blast.
yeah. So but anyway, there are a number of
Darlings with rice.
there's a number of people that you can hire, Linda, to help you clear your land.
Okay, thank you. Angie. Yeah, okay, got it.
Linda, before we get off here, I would also offer that our nonprofit SICM, we do free landowner surveys. So if you're just wanting to know what you have, it sounds like you know a majority of what you're dealing with. But if you wanted to know, everything that's on your property, we can come to your place and do a survey at no cost.
Who do I contact?
Me,
Okay, but who's me?
Amber. Here, I'll put my
Amber.
I'll
Okay,
put my email in the chat here.
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for, sorry I had to get here late, but I'm really happy to be able to be a part of this. Thank you.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing your land invasive free.
Well, I gave 5 acres to my stepdaughter. I deeded the back 5 to India, but I'm sure she'll be willing to let other people come and assess. The autumn olive is crazy. Rick was protecting it. Rick thought it was so beautiful, and until we understood this, like, oh wait, no, this is a bad tree. And there's just tons of them. It's like it's insane. This spring was just appalling. All the trees up by the river up there by Main Street, where Tapawingo comes up to Main Street, there's like thick with the Calorie Repairs. And they're crazy here, and the autumn olive and the honeysuckle is crazy here, and haven't been able to keep up with it. India has been doing a lot with honeysuckle in the back. She's cutting, she and Ian Thompson have been cutting and poisoning, daubing, but there's a lot more than they can get to. And and she's not doing now I own the front half of the property, and I want to pay somebody to get a big head start on it. So thank you.
Yep.
All right, well, it is 7:32. So unless there's any other questions, I think we can say thank you to our presenters, and thank you for all of you for being here tonight. Again, I did record the presentation, so everyone who signed up for the presentation tonight will get a follow-up email, and I will include the chat. There was so much information that was included in that, so I'll make sure to include a copy of the chat with that as well. So I would say to Amber and Bryce, if there's any other, and Gus, if there's any other additional information you would like to be a part of that email, if you will just send that to me or Gus, and he can get it to me since you have Gus's email. And I will also include that in the email that I send out to everyone who is with us tonight. So
Thanks, everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
Find good trouble.
Thank you. See you later, Amber.
Later, Gator.